You ever stood in the middle of a town and watched a human being sold off like a sack of feed? Not hidden behind curtains, not whispered about in some back room, but right there in the open where the sun could see it all. Red Hollow's Main Street, between the saloon and the bakery, broad daylight, as casual as if they were swapping a mule. No shame in it, no secrecy, just a crude wooden cage, the kind you'd use to haul dogs. Only this time it held a girl. Couldn't have been more than 24. Her skin was bruised in ugly blotches, her white dress torn and sliding off her shoulders, dirt rubbed into her arms and cheeks. Her wrists were bound with ropes so rough it had rubbed them raw, blood seeping through where she clearly fought too long against it. And the crowd, God help me, the crowd. They gathered like it was some Sunday fair. Men holding beers, women with baskets, children pointing and laughing like it was some show put on for them. Royce Tiller, a cruel bastard with a face twisted by meanness, stood proud on a crate like an auctioneer. He barked out the crowd, voice full of spit and mockery, called her a wild thing, bragged how she'd bitten him when he tried to tame her, said he was done wasting time and was letting her go for cheap. $1. Just a single damn dollar for a life. Who wants a piece of wild meat for $1? He shouted. And that's all she was to them. Meat. The worst wasn't the cage or the ropes or Royce's grin. It was the silence. The sheriff didn't step in. The preacher kept his mouth shut. Teachers, shopkeepers, the old folks rocking on their porches, all of them looked away. No one lifted a hand. The town itself had rotted. What was happening there wasn't just a girl being degraded. It was a soul of Red Hollow turning to dust. Then came the sound, barely more than the creak of a door on old hinges. A hand went up in the back. Jonah Briggs, 50-something, weathered hat, boots worn thin, beard like he'd stopped bothering. He walked forward, slow but steady, didn't say much, looked at Royce, then at the girl, then spoke, plain as could be, $1. That was it. No applause, no smirks. Royce looked rattled, like someone had doused him with cold well water. But he didn't argue. He shoved the rope at Jonah. Briggs stepped up, untied the girl's wrists, slipped his coat around her shoulders, and led her off without another word. No questions, no promises. Just walked away with her like he couldn't stand the thought of her spending one more second in that cage. Back at his place, Jonah didn't pry. He didn't demand her story or her name. He gave her the spare room, a clean dress from a chest, and an old mug that had once belonged to his wife. Then he went back to his chores, mending fences, feeding stock, as though nothing had shifted. But something had. Clara, that's what he came to call her, didn't weep. She didn't rage. She didn't jump at the slam of a door or coyote cries cutting through the night. She moved through his home quiet as a shadow, but not invisible, always watching, always working. She swept the porch before the sun rose. She tightened hinges, cooked plain but careful meals, stitched his old shirts, even fixed up the chicken coop no one had touched since his wife passed. And though she said nothing, Jonah found himself talking more. At first, just muttering about the weather, the cows, the damn squirrels chewing at the fence posts. But then he realized he wasn't talking to himself anymore. He was talking to her, and she was listening. One night a storm came roaring in. Rain like stones on the roof, wind screaming at the windows. Jonah woke and found her standing in the hallway barefoot, arms wrapped around herself, looking lost in her own skin. He didn't touch her, just nodded and opened the kitchen door. They sat together for hours, drinking coffee, letting the storm rage outside. No words, but something softer than silence built between them. It wasn't love. Not then. But it was more than nothing. A fragile warmth, a thread tying them together. The next morning, he found breakfast waiting. By his plate lay a cloth napkin, stitched by hand. His initials on one side, hers on the other. She still hadn't spoken a single word, but Jonah knew she had begun to stay. Some people speak with endless chatter, and some carry more weight in silence than words ever could. Jonah was mending the barn door when it happened. The crash, sudden and sharp, breaking the fragile piece they'd built. And in that moment, the question rose like a storm. What happens when silence is no longer enough? The crash came sudden from the kitchen, sharp as glass shattering against stone. Jonah stepped in fast and found Clara on the floor, her hand bleeding, a broken cup lying in pieces beside her. She didn't cry out, didn't flinch, didn't even look surprised. She simply held up her palm, steady as if the pain were nothing to her. Jonah grabbed a rag, wrapped the cut gently, and then stepped back, giving her room. She rose slowly, walked to the fireplace, and from the stack of wood beside it, pulled a rough, splintered piece. With her bandaged hand, she pressed her finger to the wound, dipped it in her own blood, and began to write across the grain. Each stroke deliberate, slow, unshaking. First AC, then an L, an A. She stopped for a moment, then carried on R, A, V, O, S, S. When the last letter was finished, she stared at it in silence, her name written in red across the wood. She wiped her hand against her skirt, turned, and walked out the door as though nothing had happened. Jonah stayed behind, staring at the wood like it had weight far heavier than it seemed. Later that night, he carved his own name into another piece, small, quiet, not meant to draw eyes, and set it beside hers on the mantel. Names etched not in stone, not in trees, but in the stillness of a house where no one else was looking. The days that followed were hushed, the kind of quiet Jonah had grown to treasure, the creak of the porch boards, the restless snort of the horse in the barn, Clara humming low in the mornings as she set coffee to boil over the fire. Then came the dust. Jonah saw it rising first, out past the fence line, a single rider moving slow, steady. The closer he came, the more certain Jonah was. That swagger, the tilt in the saddle, Royce Tiller, a man who thought everything owed him something. He stopped at the gate, climbed down, and stood there like he owned the ground beneath his boots. Same scar cutting down his face, same venom in his eyes. Jonah stepped out to meet him with nothing but his voice. No rifle in hand, no bluster, just calm. Royce smirked, leaning heavy on arrogance. I came to take back what's mine. Jonah kept walking, slow and steady, stopping close enough that the air between them felt taut. Then, without warning, he drew his revolver and fired. The shot hit dirt not 2 feet from Royce's boots, thunder rolling across the open air. For the first time, Royce flinched. The grin cracked. She was never yours, Jonah said, voice even. Not then, not now. Behind him, Clara appeared on the porch. No words, no plea, just holding that piece of wood with her name carved into it. Royce's eyes darted from her to Jonah. His jaw tightened. You'll regret this. Jonah took one step closer, closing the space until no bluff could hide between them. No, he said. You will. Royce broke first, climbed onto his horse and rode away without another word, slower than when he'd come. The dust behind him never rose. That night, Clara left her wooden nameplate on the table. Jonah added his beside it once more, side by side. No blood spilled, no bodies dropped, yet a battle won all the same. Not through force, but by refusing to move when wrong came knocking. After that, things settled. Royce never returned. Folks in town didn't ask questions, but when Jonah passed through for supplies, they tipped their hats a little lower, lingered a little longer in their nods. Back home, nothing seemed to change, not on the surface. Clara still kept her routines, still fixed what broke, still brewed the coffee strong at dawn. But the silences were different now, softer, warmer. Some evenings they sat together on the porch, no words needed, listening to the wind. Jonah would share fragments of the life he'd lived, the wife he lost, the years he thought second chances weren't meant for men like him. Clara never spoke much, but she smiled more, stayed longer in the kitchen. Once, she even laughed at one of his poor jokes. One morning, Jonah stepped outside as the sun was climbing and found 2 mugs waiting on the porch rail. Not because one of them had set them there for the other, but because both had risen at the same time, side by side, without saying a word. They never named it love. They didn't need to. Some kinds of love show themselves in mended shirts, in patched quilts, in silences that feel like company instead of loneliness, in coins spent without question, in names written where no one else will ever see. If you've carried yourself this far into the story, maybe it stirred something in you. Maybe it made you remember someone who once stood with you when no one else did. Or maybe it reminded you of a moment you thought was gone for good. If so, let the story linger. Hold on to it. Because second chances aren't storms or miracles. They're quiet things. They're found in the steady hand of someone who stays when the world falls away, and in the courage of someone who learns how to write their name again. And if you think voices like theirs matter, let them keep reaching the people who still believe in quiet strength. Now, take a breath and ask yourself, when everything else was lost, who stood beside you? And when the time comes, who will you stand beside?